I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old's Oscar Countdown. This time we are doing another bonus episode, the second one in a week, in which I'm going to be giving my thoughts on the Critics' Choice nominations that were released this morning. We gave our predictions for the Golden Globe nominations, and then on Monday released a video giving my thoughts and analysis on that. Didn't do a predictions episode for the Critics' Choice nominations just because there's so many categories and frankly so many potential kind of options, and they really decide to kind of choose the top 6, 7, sometimes 8 in a certain category. But figured it would be worthwhile to do a little bit of a shorter episode, just giving my 3 main takeaways from the award show. Because I know there's so many award shows, the Globes, the Critics' Choice, all the different guilds, all these critics groups. Sometimes it's a little bit helpful to have someone like myself who has been doing Oscar prognosticating and predictions for over 8 years. We just got top 4% on Gold Derby in terms of the Golden Globe nominations. So we have a really great track record here. Every year getting really accurate predictions. But ultimately, doing these videos to count down towards what it means for the Oscars. That's the big one. That's why we call things Old Oscar Countdown. And if you appreciate these videos, please do leave your comments down below. We've been getting a lot of great support on the past couple of videos. Lots of comments, lots of thoughts. I love to hear that and love to see that, so please do keep it up. And if you don't want to miss videos like this, subscribe to the channel. That way you don't miss out on any videos, so that when there is a bonus episode, let's say on a Thursday, you won't be left in the dark. Traditionally, we have been week over week predicting different categories and doing deep dives into certain categories. We've covered a lot of them, but not all of them yet. We're still going to be covering, the design categories probably in one episode, and documentary and editing and international film. So don't worry for the more traditional Old Oscar Countdown fans. Those videos are still coming, and I think those videos are super important as well, because no one does the deep dive in the best editing category or some of these more below the line categories like I do every year on this channel, and have been now on the 9th season here for over 8.5 years. But in this episode, it's not going to be that. It's going to be a bit of a shorter one, just giving my kind of 3 main takeaways from the whole list of nominations and what we can kind of take away from the nominations and what they ultimately mean for helping us predict the Oscar nominations and then eventually the Oscars. And just jumping to things, my first main takeaway is that the Best Picture race, in terms of our list of 10 nominees, is still pretty wide open. I think that there is a pretty solid top 6, top 7, but movies that could get nominated in the 8, 9, 10 slot are really up in the air. I think there's probably a total of 5 movies that are competing in the 8, 9, 10 slot. Those movies being A Real Pain, Nickel Boys, The Substance, A Complete Unknown, and September 5. And I kind of think of it as like a Rorschach test, where depending on which awards group you appreciate or value more, will give you an indication as to what you think will get nominated. A movie like The Substance has had some great past few days here, getting lots of nominations at the Globes, overperforming here at Critics' Choice. It definitely feels well positioned to get nominated right now for Best Picture at the Oscars, but it's always important to keep in mind the Globes and the Critics' Choice. They don't make up any, none of those voting bodies overlap with the Academy, so it's hard to tell exactly right now, but a lot of support for that movie. Even still, though, you could say, okay, there's support for it right now, but there's not real support necessarily. We'll see what happens at SAG. We'll see if the genre bias is too strong for the Academy, which historically has not liked horror movies. So there's still not a guarantee for that. You have a movie like Nickel Boys, which kind of underperformed a bit at the Golden Globes, but maybe overperformed here. But there's still some concerns about how much acting support the movie will ultimately have if Aunjanue Ellis-Taylor doesn't get nominated, and that may hurt its overall chances at getting nominated. Then you have a movie like A Real Pain, which did well at the Golden Globes, but then I'm surprised here and then that it didn't get nominated for Best Picture, kind of disappointed in that sense. But that was the only small disappointment, I would say, from this awards body. So you could say maybe that's in, but you could also say maybe it's out. September 5, I think you could still make a strong argument that it's a potential Best Picture nominee because it got in for screenplay here. It got in for editing. So definitely, still a contender. And then, even got Best Film Drama at the Globes. And then the other movie being A Complete Unknown, which has the benefit of being released, during Christmas, has this kind of momentum of everyone seeing it, everyone raving about Timothée Chalamet's performance. Edward Norton kind of came out of nowhere and got a Golden Globe nomination as well as Critics' Choice. I think that was a little bit surprising just because of how late the movie was released. So that main takeaway ultimately being that we don't really know what's going to happen in the 8, 9, 10 slots at the Oscars. I will be giving my updated Best Picture rankings in the beginning of the month, beginning of the new year in January, to just do a deep dive as to why I'm going with a certain movie over another. But even myself, I'm kind of wrestling between The Substance and Real Pain and Nickel Boys as a complete unknown, and maybe less September 5, but still a contender in those kind of last three spots. I think there's a multitude of potential options that you can go with. So that's kind of the first main takeaway is related to Best Picture. The second main takeaway is that our acting categories, I think, are a lot more fluid than in years past. Sometimes by the time Critics' Choice comes around, we know the top 4 in most of the acting categories. Sometimes we have clear winners in multiple of the acting categories. And yet I don't really feel that way this year. I looked at the kind of male acting categories, and I think I kind of know the nominees for actor. I think I kind of know the nominees for supporting actor, but interestingly, I don't really know the winners. Whereas on the Best Actress side, I maybe have a better idea of who could potentially win, but the nominees are so wide open. You take a look at something like Best Actor I mentioned, the top 5 I think are pretty locked in terms of nominations, but I'm still not sure of the winner. A complete unknown is peaking late here, which is always great for the Oscars to be released later and then be well liked. People are talking about Chalamet's performance. He's a well-liked movie star. Maybe this is his Oscar moment. Adrien Brody already has one, but Adrien Brody I still think is the front runner because he's connected to The Brutalist, which is a little bit more liked of a Best Picture movie and also gives a terrific performance. So I'm not, for sure I know the winner in this category, Best Actor, even though we know the nominations. Similarly, like I said, with the Best Supporting Actor category, where I think the top 4 of Yura Borisov, Denzel Washington, Kieran Culkin, and Guy Pearce are kind of pretty locked in, and then that 5th spot is probably Clarence Macklin or Edward Norton, depending on who you think fits it the best. That's probably, I'd say, a pretty good chance of that being the 5. But the winners, I really still don't have an idea of. I guess you could say it's Kieran Culkin, but the movie A Real Pain, hasn't been doing that well actually in critics groups, as well as something like Critics' Choice here doing a slight underperformance. So there's a question of if that movie will have enough support to get Kieran Culkin ultimately the win in that category. And so there's still some confusion there. And then when you look at the kind of female acting categories, Best Actress, in terms of nominations, I'm confident in Mikey Madison and Carla Sofia Gascon, and then that's kind of it. That's a little bit different than most years where I feel like the actress categories I have a better grasp over. Right now, I really only feel confident in 2 of the picks, because you have someone like an Angelina Jolie who got nominated at the Globes and got nominated here, but Maria kind of disappointed, I thought, at Critics' Choice, not getting in for cinematography, not getting in for production design, so maybe that movie isn't as well liked as we think, so maybe that hurts her chances. Nicole Kidman for Baby Girl missed out here. That was a bit of a surprise, and the way things are going, I think Baby Girl is probably if it does get nominated for Nicole Kidman, a low nominee for that movie. You have Cynthia Erivo for Wicked. My concern with her is that ultimately she is not the main standout of her movie. It's Ariana Grande, I would say. But she's a past nominee and in a movie that's well-liked, so there could be some momentum there. Marianne Jean-Baptiste for Hard Truths got nominated here, but didn't at the Golden Globes. And then even a movie like Hard Truths, actually I think got kind of snubbed and missed out on screenplay. I was pretty confident it would get in for screenplay, so kind of snubbed here at Critics' Choice a bit. But then, the movie's been doing so well at kind of the New York Film Critics and Los Angeles Film Critics circles. So there's some critical group support there that maybe will push her over the edge, that maybe is a little bit more aligned with the Academy's tastes. And then, of course, Demi Moore, who's had a great success here, riding the wave of The Substance, clearly being a well-liked movie amongst awards groups. So she can definitely get in, but there's always still that question of how much of the movie is she really in? There's stretches of the movie where it's Margaret Qualley's movie at certain points, and will the Oscars really appreciate a comeback narrative in an era in which narratives haven't been that fruitful in recent years, at the Oscars in particular? So there's so much there for actress, even supporting actress, the same exact thing in my mind, where I only feel confident in 2 of the nominees, Zoe Saldana and Ariana Grande, because Danielle Deadwyler for the Piano Lesson, I think that movie's really decreased since it was premiered, and I think probably Danielle doesn't get in at the Oscars. You have, Isabella Rossellini for Conclave, which looks strong, but you would also say that, well, she got in at the Globes because she's Hollywood royalty. She got in at Critics' Choice because they loved Conclave so much with so many nominations, so that's why she's in there. Aunjanue Ellis-Taylor, we mentioned a little bit earlier for Nickel Boys. I'm kind of concerned that she doesn't get in for SAG, actually, so she would really need maybe a BAFTA nomination, which I'm not super confident she would necessarily get either, so maybe this is her only nomination, in which I wouldn't feel confident necessarily about predicting her. Margaret Qualley for The Substance has been doing well, but she's not the standout of her movie. It is Demi Moore, and similar issue with Demi Moore in a way where she's not, Margaret Qualley's character is not in stretches of this movie. There's just so many options. I mean, even Felicity Jones, which we haven't mentioned yet, she kind of got snubbed here. That was kind of a big surprise in my mind, not getting in for this category. I still think she'll get in at the Oscars, but she missed here, so there could be maybe less appreciation for that performance than maybe we think. So ultimately, I guess that main takeaway is that the acting categories, particularly in terms of the female acting nominations, I think there's 7, 8 real strong contenders. I mean, we even mentioned Selena Gomez for supporting actress. I mean, there's so many possible contenders for some of those categories. And even sometimes in like the male side, in terms of the winners, I don't know if I'm confident in any of the acting winners right now, except for maybe Mikey Madison. I feel good about that for Anora, but all the other ones, if you told me it's Ariana Grande or Zoe Saldana, I believe you. If it was Clarence Backlund for Sing Sing, I wouldn't be that surprised. It is kind of one of these unpredictable years, which makes for such a great, exciting award season. And then the final takeaway that I want to mention is just that the Critics' Choice Awards and their nominations in particular may not be that relevant as they once were. You still see that these nominations are probably going to be pretty accurate to the Oscars. That being said, what we are seeing is a shift with the Oscars and with Critics' Choice and them kind of drifting apart in my mind. The Oscars in the past few years have gone increasingly more international. That grows every single year. Whereas Critics' Choice is still very American. We see a movie last year like Barbie, which got all these nominations at Critics' Choice Awards. It underperformed in many places at the Oscars with Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie and things like that. And even in past years, some of the highest nominated movies at Critics' Choice were like West Side Story, which doesn't do that well at the Oscars. So I think they can be somewhat helpful for a general idea in the same way the Globes are, but in particular for something like the directing category when they're nominating 8 people. It's not that helpful in terms of what we do, trying to predict the Oscars and trying to figure it out in that Oscar race. That's so much fun. It just has become, I think, a little bit less reliable, a little bit less trustworthy in recent years, in particular for its nominations, because we kind of know what the top 6, 7 contenders are in most categories. Just look at Gold Derby odds. So I don't know if the Critics' Choice Awards have been that helpful at predicting the Oscars in the future. Still an interesting award show. They still got the celebrities to show up, so speeches can matter. But maybe we think of Critics' Choice more closely aligned with the Golden Globes, even just in terms of that international point. I mean, the fact that you look at the movies that were underperforming at Critics' Choice nominations this morning, Maria, The Brutalist, The Room Next Door. I mean, Maria and The Room Next Door are both movies with international European directors, so maybe the Americans that of Critics' Choice don't really appreciate those kinds of films, whereas the Academy may. In the same way, The Brutalist, I think, is, Brady Corbett is almost a European auteur, even though he is an American, because of just how well celebrated he was first in Europe and just the sensibilities of his movies, in particular The Brutalist. I mean, The Brutalist is closer to Once Upon a Time in America or The Last Emperor than it is, I would say, personally, like The Godfather or even like Lawrence of Arabia or something. It is a little bit more of a European auteur in its approach to storytelling than it is a traditional kind of American 3-hour epic like Oppenheimer, I would even say, even though Nolan is English. So like I said with the Globes earlier in the week, this isn't necessarily a super accurate awards body. None of the members overlap with the Oscars. Let's still be patient. Let's still rely on the guilds to be the most indicative. BAFTAs, SAG, because we know people who vote on BAFTAs, for example, there's many people who also vote on the Academy. We get kind of real data samples from that way. So let's not overreact too much to it. Let's not say the substance is winning Best Picture. I know maybe you want to say that because you're a fan of the movie or you're rooting for it. I understand all those things, but I always want to give you that kind of reminder that when you're talking about Oscar season, it's fun to root for certain movies that we like or performances that we like. But when we're trying to be the most accurate at predicting what's actually going to happen, Critics' Choice and Golden Globes just aren't as valuable as SAG and BAFTA. So don't overreact too much with these nominations. Always important to keep that in mind. But that's about it for this week's episode, or kind of bonus episode here on Thursday. Like I mentioned up top, I'd appreciate it if you'd leave your comments down below. Let me know if there's any snubs or surprises that you saw in the Critics' Choice nominations. And stay tuned to this channel. The Oscar shortlists are coming up on Tuesday, so there won't be a video on Monday, but Tuesday afternoon, evening, we'll kind of have a video up and ready about kind of the snubs and surprises from the Oscar shortlists, which if you're a real Oscar fan, some of those smaller categories, those technical categories, the shortlist can give us a really great idea of what's going to happen even at the above the line stuff. So I really hope you stick around and check out that video as well. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.